It was an early morning at Nexus Innovations, its glass and steel headquarters shimmering in the heart of Silicon Valley. The skyscrapers reflected the bright California sun, but inside, the air was heavy, as if weighed down by whispers and cold glances. Eleanor Washington, a 79-year-old black woman, pushed her cleaning cart through the gleaming hallways. Her gray hair was tied back neatly, and she wore a plain gray janitor's uniform, her old canvas shoes squeaking softly on the polished floor. Her hands, though thin, gripped the mop handle firmly, her sharp eyes observing everything, even though no one noticed her. To them, Eleanor was just an invisible janitor, a faded figure amidst the expensive suits and the relentless clatter of keyboards. The hallway was empty, save for the hum of a printer from the copy room. Eleanor stopped to wipe a smudge from the floor when a sneer echoed behind her. "Oh, my apologies, old lady." A middle-aged man, Mark Thompson, the head of planning, stood there with a coffee cup in his hand. His eyes glinted with amusement as the coffee from his cup accidentally spilled onto the floor, splashing onto Eleanor's uniform. The smell of hot coffee soaked her shirt, but she said nothing, simply bending down silently to wipe the floor with a rag. "Mark, you're acting like a child." A young woman, Sarah, a new employee, giggled. With her glittery nails and a tight skirt, she scrolled through her phone, not even bothering to look at Eleanor. "Come on, it's no big deal. Janitors are supposed to clean, right?" Mark smirked, tossing his empty coffee cup toward the trash can, intentionally missing so it rolled across the floor. "Watch out for the wet floor, old lady. If you fall, it's on you." He laughed loudly and walked away, leaving Eleanor alone with the spreading coffee puddle. She said nothing. Her hands slowly cleaned the floor, each movement calm. But a question echoed in her mind. Where did this company go wrong? Eleanor Washington was no ordinary janitor. She was the founder of Nexus Innovations, the woman who had built this multi-billion-dollar tech corporation from a tiny garage in Oakland 40 years ago. She had started with a simple idea technology to connect people. But now, having handed the company over to her son, James Washington, she sensed something was deeply wrong. The beautiful numbers on the reports couldn't hide the truth the company was rotting from the inside. A few years ago, Eleanor had stepped down as chairwoman, making way for James, a smart man with an MBA from Stanford who seemed to be missing something. She had trusted her son to lead Nexus in the right direction, but her intuition, the same gut feeling that had guided her through countless challenges, was screaming a warning. Something was wrong, not just with the numbers, but with the people inside the company. To find out, Eleanor decided to become a ghost in her own kingdom, a janitor, someone no one would notice, but who could see everything. That morning, as Eleanor was mopping the fourth-floor hallway, a young woman named Emily Carter rushed past. Emily, a 23-year-old contract employee, wore a beige cardigan and black slacks, her blonde hair tied back neatly, with no makeup. She clutched a stack of documents, her steps hurried and anxious. "Sorry, I dropped a paper." Emily bent down to retrieve a sheet that had slipped from her grasp, her eyes glancing past Eleanor without stopping. To Emily, Eleanor was just a janitor, not worth a second thought. Eleanor watched Emily from a distance. The girl worked hard but was constantly overlooked because she was a contract worker. People like Emily, without prestigious degrees or powerful connections, were often ignored at Nexus. Eleanor saw it in Emily's eyes, a desperate effort to be recognized, constantly pushed down by sneers and dismissive looks. The sound of leather shoes echoed from the end of the hall. James Washington, the CEO, strode forward. He wore a navy blue suit, his hair perfectly combed, his eyes glued to his phone. Eleanor stopped mopping and looked at her son. For a fleeting moment, Their eyes met, but James didn't recognize his mother. He just walked past, without a word, without a glance. To him, she was just an anonymous janitor. Eleanor stood still, a pang of pain in her heart. James, your eyes used to be warmer than this. She resumed her work, but a plan was already forming in her mind. As a janitor, she could access the hidden corners that a CEO would never see. She would watch, listen, and uncover the truth. Nexus Innovations wasn't just her company, it was her legacy, and she would not let it crumble. Around noon, Eleanor pushed her cart toward the copy room. Shouting erupted from inside. "What is this? This document is all wrong." Tom Bradley, a sales manager, stood over Emily, jabbing a finger at the papers on the table. Emily's head was bowed, her shoulders trembling. "I'm sorry, sir, but I followed the instructions exactly. Don't make excuses." Tom cut her off, his voice cold. "Who do you think you are, a contractor? Talking back people like you will always be temporary." Emily bit her lip, her eyes red but tearless. She silently gathered her documents, her hands clenched as if trying to hold back her emotions. Eleanor stood just outside the door, pretending to wipe the glass frame. She looked at Emily, seeing the hurt in her every movement. She moved closer, her voice low and warm. "Are you all right?" Emily flinched, looking up with guarded eyes. "Thank you. But I'm not supposed to talk to people outside my department." Her voice was small, weary. "If it's so hard here, why don't you leave?" Eleanor asked, her gaze sincere. Emily gave a bitter laugh, one filled with pain. "I don't have a choice. My grandmother is very sick, and I have to make money. I want to become a full-time employee so she doesn't have to worry anymore." She paused, her eyes welling up. "I thought if I worked hard enough, I would have a chance here." Eleanor nodded, saying no more, but inside her, a fire had been lit. Emily Carter wasn't just a contract worker. She was proof of everything Nexus had forgotten: dedication, perseverance, and dreams being crushed by injustice. Eleanor knew her fight wasn't just to save the company, but to save people like Emily. Late in the day, when the office was nearly empty, Eleanor saw Emily still at her desk, typing away. The screen glowed with a detailed proposal, full of colors and data. Eleanor watched in silence. That proposal wasn't the work of an ordinary contractor, it was the work of someone with real talent. But would anyone even notice? Eleanor pushed her cart away, her mind racing. What she had seen today, Mark's arrogance, Emily's pain. James's indifference was just the surface. Beneath it, something darker was festering within Nexus. And Eleanor Washington, the invisible janitor, was ready to expose it. Night fell over Silicon Valley, the lights from the skyscrapers twinkling like lost stars. Inside the Nexus Innovations office, the lonely sound of typing echoed from a corner. Emily Carter, the contract employee with her blonde hair tied back, was still there. Her eyes fixed on the computer screen. Her hands flew across the keyboard, adjusting every number, every chart in the proposal she'd been working on all week. Beads of sweat dotted her forehead, but her gaze never wavered, as if the world had shrunk to just her and the data. Eleanor Washington pushed her cleaning cart through the dark hallway, the light from Emily's office spilling out like a small beacon in a storm. She paused, pretending to wipe a smudge off the glass door, but her eyes were fixed on the young woman. The proposal on Emily's screen was no ordinary document. It was a detailed plan to improve business processes, with clear data and sharp analysis. Eleanor had seen hundreds of proposals as chairwoman, but this one had something few possessed: heart. Emily wasn't just working for a paycheck, she was working to prove her worth. She entered the room, the cart's wheels squeaking. Emily jumped, her eyes wide. "Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot to turn off the light." She quickly stood up, flustered. Eleanor smiled gently, her voice low and warm. "It's all right, young lady. I was just passing by. What are you doing so late?" Emily hesitated, her eyes darting to the screen, then spoke softly. I'm just finishing a proposal. I heard contractors could also pitch ideas, so I wanted to try." Eleanor nodded, moving closer. She glanced at the screen, at the neatly arranged charts and the sharp market analysis. "You did this all by yourself?" she asked, her voice filled with genuine impression. Emily nodded, a slight blush on her cheeks. "Yes, but I'm sure no one will care. I just wanted to do my best." Eleanor said nothing more, just gave a slight nod, but a thought ignited in her mind. This girl is a diamond in the rough. But is this company wise enough to see it? She left the room and continued her cleaning. But her mind was working. What she saw in Emily, the diligence, the talent, and the pain, was clear evidence that Nexus was overlooking its most valuable people. But that was just one piece of the puzzle. Eleanor knew that to save the company, she needed to uncover the deeper, hidden rot. The next morning, the 7th-floor hallway was buzzing with unusual activity. A group of employees gathered near the conference room, their laughter echoing down the hall. Eleanor pushed her cart past, overhearing the voice of Robert Hayes, a sales director, booming from the room. "With this, we'll land the big contract next month," he said, his voice thick with self-satisfaction. Beside him was his son, Liam Hayes, a new employee who was coddled thanks to his boss's son status. Liam laughed loudly, clapping another sales manager, Tom Bradley, on the shoulder. "Don't worry, my dad's got it covered. My proposals just need to have my name on them." Eleanor paused, pretending to tie a new trash bag. She glanced through the crack in the conference room door and saw Liam holding up a flimsy proposal. Just a few pages of text, no charts, no data. Robert nodded, patting his son's back. "Well done, Liam. Keep this up, and you'll be a manager in no time." Tom sneered. "Unlike some contractors who work forever and never know their place." The three of them burst into laughter, completely unaware that Eleanor was standing outside, memorizing every word. She continued pushing her cart, but her heart felt heavy. Robert Hayes wasn't just a sales director. He was part of a larger problem, a system where power and personal connections crushed talent. Eleanor remembered the early days of Nexus, when she and her team worked day and night, not caring who was who, as long as they had a good idea. Now, the company she'd built had become a place where people like Emily were trampled, while people like Liam were propped up. Around noon, as Eleanor was cleaning the glass in the copy room, the shouting started again. "What the hell is this? Emily?" Tom Bradley stood in front of Emily's desk, holding a ripped-up stack of papers. "This proposal is garbage. Do you think you're smarter than the entire sales team?" Emily stood there, her shoulders trembling, trying to explain. "But, sir, I did what was requested. I have the data, the analysis." Tom cut her off, throwing the papers on the floor. "Don't argue. Contractors should shut up and do the work they're given. A proposal. You think you have the right—" The papers scattered like the broken pieces of Emily's dream. She bent down to pick them up, her voice a tiny whisper. "I'm sorry. I'll do it again." Tom snorted and walked away, leaving Emily alone with the mess. Eleanor stood a few feet away, her hands tightening on the mop handle. She wanted to step forward, to say something, but she held back. If she revealed herself now, everything would fall apart. Instead, She quietly took her phone from her pocket and opened the recording app. Tom's voice was still echoing. "Learn your place, girl. Nobody here needs your stupid ideas." Eleanor pressed record, capturing Tom's voice, every word like a knife. Late in the afternoon. Eleanor pushed her cart to Robert Hayes's office. The door was slightly ajar, and no one was inside. She knocked softly. "Excuse me?" No answer. She stepped in, her eyes scanning the messy desk. A pile of receipts lay scattered next to a cold cup of coffee. Eleanor knew she shouldn't touch them, but her gut told her to check. She glanced down the hall, making sure no one was watching, then quickly flipped through a receipt. Dinner party at a San Francisco bar, 8 people, $3 $500. Another, client gifts, $1 $200. They were all filed under client entertainment expenses, but the amounts and frequency were highly unusual. She took out her phone and quickly photographed each receipt. Every picture was another piece of the larger puzzle she was assembling. As she was placing the last receipt back, footsteps sounded in the hallway. "Who's there?" Robert Hayes's voice was sharp. Eleanor quickly turned her back, pretending to tie a trash bag. The door swung open, and Robert entered. His eyes narrowed. "What are you doing in here?" Eleanor bowed her head, her voice small. "Sir, I was just emptying the trash. I'm sorry. I'll leave now." Robert stared at her, as if trying to find something amiss. "Don't you go touching things on my desk. Next time, knock first," he growled, then turned away. Eleanor nodded, pushing her cart out of the room, her heart pounding but her face a mask of calm. The phone in her pocket now held the first pieces of hard evidence, and she knew the fight had just begun. That night, Eleanor sat alone in her small apartment in Oakland. On the table was a notebook where she wrote everything down: Tom's insults, Robert's favoritism, Emily's pain. She opened her phone, reviewing the photos of the receipts and the audio recording. Each piece of evidence was a brick in the wall of justice she was building. But she knew that to bring down men like Robert and Tom, she needed more. And to save Nexus, she needed to ensure that people like Emily had a chance to shine. She stood up and looked out the window at the distant city lights. "It's not over yet. Nexus," she whispered. "I will clean this place up, no matter how long it takes." That night, Eleanor didn't sleep. She knew tomorrow would be a long day, and the dark secrets of Nexus were waiting for her to uncover them. The late afternoon sun streamed through the large glass panels of the Nexus Innovations headquarters, casting long shadows across the 10th floor hallway. Eleanor Washington pushed her cleaning cart, the squeak of its wheels mingling with the hushed whispers of the staff. Glances slid past her, but no one truly saw her. To them, Eleanor was just an old, invisible janitor amid the polished suits and animated conversations. But today, her sharp eyes were searching for something, another piece of the dark puzzle she was slowly assembling. Eleanor stopped near the main conference room, where a group of employees had gathered before a meeting. The loud laughter of Robert Hayes, the sales director, echoed from within. "Just let Liam handle the presentation, fellas. He's our new star," he boomed, clapping his son, Liam Hayes, on the back. Liam stood with a look of smug satisfaction, holding a flimsy proposal. Tom Bradley, the other sales manager, nodded in approval. "Absolutely, Robert. Liam has vision, not like those contractors who just try to look busy." Eleanor bent down, pretending to wipe a smudge from the floor. But her ears caught every word. She glanced through the crack in the door and saw Emily Carter standing in a corner, clutching a stack of documents. Her head bowed. Emily had prepared a new proposal, thick with data and ideas, but no one was paying her any attention. Instead, all eyes were on Liam, who only needed the title, "the boss's son," to be celebrated. Emily, are you done with the copies? Tom called out, his voice cold. Emily nodded, stepping forward to hand him the stack of papers. Yes, sir. I've checked them carefully, before she could finish. Tom snatched the documents, flipped through them, and tossed them onto the table. What took you so long? You move like a turtle. Be faster next time, or you're fired. Emily bit her lip, her shoulders trembling. But she just nodded silently and retreated to her corner. Eleanor tightened her grip on the mop, a silent anger simmering inside her. But she kept her face impassive. She knew it wasn't time to act. Not yet. When the meeting began, Eleanor pushed her cart out into the hallway but didn't go far. She stood in a corner and opened the recording app on her phone. Through the door, she heard Liam's voice as he presented his shallow proposal. We just need to add a few fancy words, and the client will sign. No need to get bogged down in numbers. The room erupted in laughter, as if it were a stroke of genius. Robert applauded, beaming with pride. That's my boy, simple and effective. Eleanor pressed record, capturing every word. She knew these boasts would soon become their weapon. During the lunch break, Eleanor took her cart to the employee cafeteria. The room was noisy, filled with laughter and whispers. A group of young employees sat in a corner, gossiping about the latest rumors. Did you hear the new contract worker quit last week? That's another one gone, a woman named Jennifer said with a dismissive tone. Couldn't handle the pressure, I guess. The sales department is hell. A young man named Michael sneered. What do they expect? People like Emily will probably be gone soon, too. Eleanor stood nearby, wiping a table, her ears catching everything. She knew that in the past 6 months, over 10 contract workers and new employees had quit, mostly from the sales and planning departments. The scraps of paper she'd found in the trash resignation letters. Torn notes all contained phrases like overwhelming pressure or felt discriminated against. Eleanor had been silently collecting them, each small piece part of a larger story. She looked over at Emily, who was sitting alone in a corner of the cafeteria, eating a cheap meal from the canteen. The young woman stared at her phone, but Eleanor could see her fingers trembling slightly as she scrolled. She approached, her voice gentle. Young lady, eating all alone. Would you like to sit with me? Emily looked up, a little surprised, then gave a weak smile. Thank you, ma'am, but I'm okay. I was just thinking about things. Emily stood up and walked away, leaving Eleanor with an uneasy feeling. She knew Emily wasn't just fighting for her job. She was fighting against a world that was turning its back on her. Eleanor returned to her work, but a plan was solidifying in her mind. The pieces she had collected, the recordings, the receipts, and stories like Emily's were forming a clear picture. Nexus wasn't just a company. It was a system that crushed people like Emily. And Eleanor would not let it continue. As evening approached, Eleanor pushed her cart to Robert Hayes's office once more. The door was ajar, and the room was empty. She entered, her eyes scanning the messy desk. A new stack of receipts sat on the corner, detailing extravagant parties, expensive gifts, and late-night taxi rides all filed under company expenses. Eleanor photographed them quickly, each picture another bullet in her arsenal. But as she was placing the last receipt back, footsteps sounded in the hall. Who's in my office? Robert's voice was sharp as a knife. Eleanor quickly turned her back, pretending to tie a trash bag, her heart hammering in her chest. Robert pushed the door open, his eyes narrowed. What are you doing in here? His voice was thick with suspicion. Eleanor bowed her head, her voice small. Sir, I was just emptying the trash. I'm sorry. I'll leave now. Robert stared at her, as if searching for something wrong. Don't you go touching my things. Knock first next time. You understand, he growled. Eleanor nodded and pushed her card out. But in her pocket, her phone held the evidence that could shake Nexus to its core. That night, in her small apartment in Oakland, Eleanor sat at her kitchen table, opening her notebook. She recorded everything: Tom's insults, Robert's favoritism, Emily's pain. Each line was a reminder that she wasn't just saving her company, she was saving people. She opened her phone, reviewing the photos and recordings. Each piece of evidence was a step closer to the day she would reveal it all. She stood and looked out the window at the distant, glittering city lights. "It's not over, Nexus," she whispered. "I will clean this place up, no matter what it takes." That night, Eleanor didn't sleep. She knew tomorrow would be a long day, and the secrets in the hallways of Nexus were waiting for her to bring them to light. The dim light of late afternoon flooded through the large glass panels of Nexus Innovations, but the atmosphere inside the building was as suffocating as the air before a storm. Eleanor Washington pushed her cleaning cart down the 12th floor hallway, the squeak of its wheels mixing with the whispers of employees hurrying to an important meeting. People walked past her, ignoring the 79-year-old black woman with her gray-streaked hair and janitor's uniform. But Eleanor was not invisible. Her eyes were sharp, observing every glance, every word, like a hunter tracking its prey. Today was the day. Eleanor knew the pieces she had collected: the recordings, the photos of receipts, and heartbreaking stories like Emily Carter's were finally forming a complete picture. Nexus Innovations, the company she had built from a small garage in Oakland, was now rotting from greed and injustice. But she wasn't ready to reveal herself. Not yet. There were a few final pieces that needed to fall into place. The 12th floor hallway was busier than usual. A group of employees gathered before the main conference room, preparing for a major client presentation. Eleanor stopped nearby, pretending to wipe the glass frame, but her ears were tuned to every word. Inside, Robert Hayes's voice boomed with self-satisfaction. "Liam, son, you're going to blow them away today. Your proposal is a masterpiece." Liam Hayes, Robert's son, laughed loudly, holding a flimsy stack of papers that contained little more than a few vague ideas. "Easy, Dad. Just leave it to me." Tom Bradley, the other sales manager, clapped Liam on the back. "You're a genius. Not like those contractors who just try to look busy." Eleanor glanced through the crack in the door and saw Emily Carter standing in a corner, clutching a thick stack of documents. Her blonde hair was tied back, her eyes filled with anxiety but still holding a glimmer of hope. Emily had worked all night to perfect her proposal, but no one was paying her any attention. Instead, all eyes were on Liam, who only needed the name "the boss's son" to be hailed as a hero. Eleanor tightened her grip on the mop, a silent anger simmering inside her, but she kept her face impassive. She knew her moment was coming. The meeting began. Eleanor pushed her cart out into the hallway but didn't go far. She stood in a corner, her phone's recording app open. Through the door, Liam's voice drifted out as he presented his shallow proposal. "We just need to emphasize the brand, add a few fancy words, and the client will sign." The room erupted in laughter, as if it were a stroke of genius. Robert applauded proudly. "That's my boy, simple and effective." Eleanor pressed record, saving every word. She knew these boasts would soon become their Achilles heel. During the lunch break, Eleanor took her cart to the employee cafeteria. The room was noisy, filled with laughter and whispers. A group of young employees sat in a corner, gossiping about the latest rumors. "Did you hear the new contract worker quit last week? Another one bites the dust?" a woman named Jennifer said with a sneer. "Couldn't handle the pressure, I guess. The sales department is a nightmare." A young man named Michael scoffed. What do they expect? People like Emily will probably be gone soon, too. Eleanor stood nearby, wiping a table, her ears catching every word. She knew that in the past 6 months, over 10 contract workers and new employees had quit, mostly from sales and planning. The scraps of paper she'd found in the trash resignation letters, torn notes, all contained phrases like overwhelming pressure or felt discriminated against. Eleanor had been silently collecting them, each small piece part of a larger story. She looked over at Emily, who was sitting alone in a corner, eating a cheap meal from the canteen. The young woman stared at her phone, but Eleanor could see her fingers trembling slightly. She approached, her voice gentle. "Young lady, eating all alone, would you like to sit with me?" Emily looked up, a little surprised, then gave a weak smile. "Thank you, ma'am, but I'm okay. I was just thinking." "What's on your mind that makes you look so sad?" Eleanor asked, her gaze sincere. Emily hesitated, then sighed. "I don't think I belong here. I try my best, but no one cares. Maybe I should just give up." Eleanor placed a hand on her shoulder, her voice low and warm. "Don't give up, young lady. Someone is watching you, and you are worth more than you think." Emily looked at her, a flicker of hope in her eyes, before she bowed her head and nodded silently. Eleanor returned to her work, but the fire inside her was burning hotter than ever. Emily wasn't just a contract worker, she was a symbol of all the people Nexus had forgotten. She knew that to save the company, she had to protect people like Emily, and to do that, she needed more proof. Late in the afternoon, Eleanor pushed her cart to Robert Hayes's office. The door was ajar, and the room was empty. She knocked softly. "Excuse me." No answer. She stepped in, her eyes scanning the messy desk. A new stack of receipts lay on the corner, detailing extravagant parties in San Francisco, expensive gifts, and late-night taxi rides, all filed under client entertainment expenses. Eleanor knew the numbers didn't add up. She took out her phone and quickly photographed each receipt, each picture another piece of the puzzle. Suddenly, footsteps echoed in the hall. "Who's in my office?" Robert's voice was sharp as a knife. Eleanor quickly turned her back, pretending to tie a trash bag, her heart hammering in her chest. Robert pushed the door open, his eyes narrowed. "What are you doing in here?" His voice was thick with suspicion. Eleanor bowed her head, her voice small. "Sir, I was just emptying the trash. I'm sorry, I'll leave now." Robert stared at her, as if searching for something wrong. "Don't you go touching my things. Knock first next time. You understand?" he growled. Eleanor nodded and pushed her card out. But in her pocket, her phone held the evidence that could shake Nexus to its core. That night, in her small apartment in Oakland, Eleanor sat at her kitchen table, opening her notebook. She recorded everything: Tom's insults, Robert's favoritism, Emily's pain. Each line was a reminder that she wasn't just saving her company, she was saving people. She opened her phone, reviewing the photos and recordings. Each piece of evidence was a step closer to the day she would reveal it all. She stood and looked out the window at the distant, glittering city lights. "It's not over, Nexus," she whispered. "I will clean this place up, no matter what it costs." That night, Eleanor didn't sleep. She knew tomorrow would be a long day, and the dark secrets of Nexus were waiting for her to bring them to light. The afternoon sun gilded the headquarters of Nexus Innovations, but inside, the air was heavy, like the calm before a hurricane. Eleanor Washington stood silently in a corner of the 10th floor hallway, her hands gripping her mop handle, her sharp eyes watching the stream of employees hurrying into the large conference hall. An urgent memo had been sent out that morning, a company-wide meeting at 4 p.m. in the Founders Hall. Attendance was mandatory. No one knew what was happening, but whispers of anxiety and curiosity spread through the corridors. Eleanor pushed her cart aside. In her pocket was a small USB drive, containing everything: the audio recordings, the photos of fraudulent receipts, and the scraps of paper that told a story of injustice at Nexus. Today, she would not be an invisible janitor. Today, Eleanor Washington would return as the founder of the company, and she was about to make Nexus tremble. Inside the hall, employees buzzed with nervous chatter. Why such a last-minute meeting? Is it layoffs? A young employee named Michael whispered to his colleague. Jennifer, the woman who often sneered in the cafeteria, shrugged. Probably just Mr. Washington showing off his numbers again. So boring. Robert Hayes, the sales director, sat in the front row, a smug look on his face, his son Liam beside him, scrolling on his phone with an arrogant smile. Tom Bradley, the other sales manager, sat with his arms crossed, muttering to Robert. I hope this isn't about any trouble. We have to close this month's deals. No one noticed Emily Carter, the contract worker, sitting quietly in a corner, her eyes filled with worry. At exactly 4 p.m., the hall doors opened. Eleanor walked in, still wearing her gray janitor's uniform, her silver hair tied back, her canvas shoes squeaking on the floor. The entire hall fell silent for a second, then erupted in murmurs. What's the janitor doing here? This is a company meeting, not cleaning time. Mark Thompson, the planning head, snickered to the person next to him. She must be lost. How pathetic. But Eleanor was unfazed. She walked onto the stage, holding a USB drive and a piece of paper, her eyes sweeping over the crowd like a general surveying her troops. She plugged the USB into the laptop, her voice, low but sharp, echoing through the microphone. Please lower the screen. The technician, startled, quickly complied. The large projector screen descended, and the lights in the room dimmed. The hall fell into a heavy silence, broken only by a few nervous coughs. Let's begin, Eleanor said, her voice calm but filled with an authority that no one dared to challenge. The snickering had stopped. Suddenly, a man emerged from a side door. It was James Washington, the CEO, in his sharp navy suit, but his face was pale, as if he had just learned something terrible. He stood beside Eleanor, took the microphone, and drew a deep breath. I would like to make an introduction, he said, his voice trembling slightly. This is my mother, Eleanor Washington, the founder of Nexus Innovations, and as of today, she is returning as the chairwoman of the company. The air was sucked out of the room. Mark Thompson, the man who had spilled coffee on her, stared with his mouth agape, his phone slipping from his trembling hand. Robert Hayes froze, his eyes wide, while his son, Liam, slumped in his chair as if all the air had been knocked out of him. Tom Bradley muttered, It can't be. The employees who had once mocked her, who had called her the old janitor, now stared at the floor, their faces white with shock. Eleanor said nothing more. She clicked a button, and the screen lit up with the first audio recording. Tom's voice, cold and cruel, filled the hall. Contractors should shut up and do the work they're given. A proposal. You think you have the right? Next came Liam's voice. Just leave it to me. Dad, my proposals just need to have my name on them. The hall gasped as an image appeared on the screen, a photo of Robert handing a bulging envelope to a stranger in a private meeting room, with the caption, "Same time next month." Then came the receipts: extravagant parties, expensive gifts, all billed as company expenses. Each piece of evidence was a dagger, slicing through the polished facade of Nexus. Eleanor took the microphone, her voice not angry, but filled with a deep sorrow. I built Nexus so that everyone would be respected, no matter who they were. But I was wrong. This company has become a place where power crushes talent, where people like Emily Carter are trampled simply because they don't have status. She looked toward Emily, who was sitting in the corner, her eyes red, her hands clenched. Robert shot to his feet, his voice shaking. "You've misunderstood. I did it all for the company." But Eleanor raised a hand, silencing him. "You did not do it for the company, Robert. You did it for your own wallet." She turned to the crowd. "I have been here, as a janitor, to see what you could not. I heard the sneers, the insults, and the silent cries of people like Emily. Nexus cannot continue like this." James stepped forward, his voice cracking. "Mom, I'm sorry. I only looked at the numbers, not the people. I have failed." He bowed his head, looking more like a son than a CEO for the first time. Eleanor looked at him, her gaze softening, but her voice remained firm. "This is a final chance to make things right, James. Not just for you, but for all of us." She turned to Emily and called out, "Emily Carter, please come up here." Emily flinched, her eyes wide with panic, but she slowly stood and walked to the stage. The entire hall watched her, some with guilt, others with curiosity. Eleanor placed a hand on her shoulder, her voice warm. "Your proposal was one of the best I have ever seen. It didn't just have data, it had heart. Nexus needs people like you." Emily burst into tears. Her voice choked. I thought I was going to be fired." James took the microphone and looked at Emily. "Ms. Carter, as of today, you are a full-time employee of Nexus. We need you for the changes that are coming." The hall was silent, and then a single clap came from a corner. Then another. Soon, the entire room was filled with applause. Jennifer, the woman who had once mocked Emily, stood up and bowed her head. "I'm sorry, Emily. Your proposal was truly brilliant. I was wrong." Michael stood up too. "I'm sorry as well. I won't judge others again." Emily wiped her tears and smiled, looking truly free for the first time. Eleanor looked at her and gave a slight nod, as if to say, "You deserve this." But she knew her work wasn't finished. She turned back to the crowd, her voice resolute. "Nexus will change, but only if we all change. No one will be left behind. No one will be looked down upon. This is my promise." The meeting ended, but the atmosphere remained heavy. Robert, Liam, and Tom left the room with their heads bowed, knowing there would be no place for them at Nexus tomorrow. Eleanor stood on the stage, watching the crowd disperse. She knew the road ahead was long, but today she had lit a flame of hope. The next morning, a large poster hung in the main lobby of Nexus Listen. Respect. Build. Below it was the company logo, simple but powerful. Eleanor, back in her janitor's uniform, was quietly mopping the floor beside it. No one knew who she was, but her eyes shone with conviction. She watched Emily, now wearing a full-time employee badge, walk through the lobby with a radiant smile. In a corner, Emily stopped and made a phone call. "Grandma, I did it. I'm a full-time employee." Her voice was choked with emotion, but filled with pure happiness. Eleanor smiled to herself and pushed her cleaning cart away. "Still so much to do," she whispered, her voice as soft as the wind. Nexus had begun to change, but for Eleanor Washington, the fight for justice was never over.